Hi, this is Dave and welcome to the weekly market video recap, closing out the week for Friday, January the 11th. Interesting week in the markets. Let's take a look, starting with the, jump right into it, starting with the Dow futures on the daily chart. You can see here we had this, this pullback to this 618% retracement that we had been talking about, this support zone last week, the week before. And, this week that just passed, we really just, we pushed, last week, we pushed above this, this trend line here right into, these highs. Okay, let me just zoom in a little bit. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Here we go. Okay, to get more perspective. Now, I'm going to take these fibs off the chart. Because it's just a little bit, clean it up a little bit. Essentially what we were looking at, last week was you had in and around this area, we pushed into these highs and we were consolidating around these highs. And essentially we had a pullback to the 8-period exponential moving average. We held that 8-period exponential moving average and we pushed off when we broke through, these highs again. We broke through, some of these highs that we put in before we pulled back. And now, essentially, what we're really set to do is retest. We seem on our way to retest these highs. So, essentially, the levels that are coming into play, this is something that we've determined, or we've, been sort of expecting as a possibility. Is we've got 13,528, 13,489. So you've got a zone here that we could test of 13,483, let's say, to 13,538. So this is the immediate resistance at this point in time. All indications are still bullish. You've got my trending indicator bullish. The stochastics are in the the upper. They're buried almost at 96%. The fast stochastics. So we are a little bit overbought here. But that being said, the MACD is still positive. All indications are still positive that we could go higher and that we could retest some of these highs. Now, the other thing to note is if you look at this sort of hammer bar, and I'll just zoom into it a little bit. Let me just see here. Let me zoom into this a little bit, and you can see this hammer bar here closing out the day on Friday was very bullish. You can see the lows held high and tight, and we closed above the high. So if I actually flip over to this chart, this is a 1-minute chart. This is a 1-minute chart of the Dow. And, these were some trades that I was taking earlier on in the day. I took a long here, got out there. I took a long here and got out there. And then we established this range between these two green lines going into the afternoon. This was really the range. And if you look at, these were the highs of the day going back over here. Now, this is kind of an intraday analysis of a swing trading chart just to kind of highlight, the positive action at the close of the day. So if you look over here, this was right at noontime. That's about when I stopped day trading, for the morning, right around 12 o'clock. And, because usually the lunchtime is just kind of slop and chop. And then I'm looking for a directional move, coming outside of, 1400 hours, which is 2 p.m. Eastern. 2:30 Eastern, 3 o'clock Eastern. So if you look at what happened into the close, this is really telling. The highs were put in place over here right around 12 noon, right? The highs for the day were put in place right in here, right at around 13,423. And then if you look at the action at the end of the day, we printed new highs and we closed close to the high. So this is a 1-minute chart. And then you can see, this relative volume coming in. This is, 800 to 1,000 contracts on a 1-minute bar. And then we closed, right above those highs from noon and closing at new highs for the day. So if you look at that, and new highs for the week. So if you look at that, so there's the 1-minute chart. Now let's flip back over to the daily chart, you can see the importance of this, where, you know, we closed at the week's highs right in and around this area. In the backdrop, we have a resistance zone in here, but we're really set. You know, this is why I believe that we're possibly set to retest, you know, some of these highs going back in and around here. Now, if we actually zoom out to let's look at a month or a weekly chart rather. So let me just change this to a weekly chart. What you can see here is going, you know, further out, we're coming into a really strong area of, you know, of resistance back in around, you know, this area back in, you know, 2007, 2008, where we put in this sort of double top and then we sold off. So from the weekly charts perspective, in and around this area, you've got a lot of resistance in the backdrop. So although I do believe that we can retest, you know, some of these highs coming in here. If you look at this, you know, like 2008, you know, we had the you know, the financial crisis, and we've come all the way back right up to those highs. So looking at this from a daily chart is very bullish, but if you look at it from a weekly chart, you can see we've got a lot of resistance in the backdrop. Are we just going to, you know, blow through those highs? You know, anything's possible in the market, but I'm really expecting this to be a fairly strong resistance area. So at this point in time, I'm not really looking for a lot of you know, action, you know, through those highs. I'm really looking at that as a test of a possible retest of the highs, and then potentially, you know, some sideways action, some consolidation, or, you know, potentially even a pullback from that area. So at this point in time, I'm you know, I'm a cautious bull, recognizing that we are coming into some of these you know, multi-year highs. So let me just change this back to a daily chart and zoom in on the daily action. So once we hit these highs, I mean, that's all I'm really hazarding a guess, is that we might retest these highs. And then from there, we'll just have to reevaluate, and we'll have to see. Now, we've established a new uptrend line here. I'm just going to mark that on the chart, denoted by, you know, this pullback, which was a 618 move from this low to this high. So let me just draw this on the chart so that it's there for next week. This is a significant trend line, and you know, going forward, that will be, you know, a possible pullback area. So we'll be looking at that. And the major support levels here, 13,000, you know, 700 is really the major support. And as long as we stay above 12,700, you know, I'm more bullish than bearish on this market. So let's see what the sister indices are telling us. Let's go over to the S&P futures. Wow. Okay, the S&P futures. So this was the same scenario here, where we had the, you know, 50 to 61.8% pullback, and we pushed off from there. Let me just delete this from the chart. That's already played out. And if you look at the S&P futures, we're above those you know, those intermediate highs, and wow, okay. You can see that we closed above those highs. We pushed above them on Thursday on this green candle here, and then you can see the top of those highs was actually acting as support, you know, on Friday for the entire day. We just pulled back to those highs and we held that. So this is fairly bullish. The question will be, are we going to, you know, hold this as support and push higher, or is this really just going to kind of go sideways, maybe get a pullback and then a push higher? At this point, not really sure. Wouldn't hazard a guess, but it really looks, you know, in the S&P, there doesn't really seem to be a lot of upside potential in the S&P at this point in time. So now, because we've already retested those highs. So if we jump over now to the Nasdaq futures, you know, we're a good ways off of these highs. And let's see, this pullback kind of played out. I'm going to get rid of this Fibonacci retracement on here. I actually just want to see where the where this is in terms of this high to this low. We're above the 61.8% retracement of, you know, this high to this low. So that's, you know, net bullish. We really need to get above this resistance here in order to get anything actionable, you know, to retest these highs. So the Nasdaq definitely weaker than the Dow and the S&P. And then if we look at the let's look at the transport. So the transports are really confirming, a higher move in the Dow. So if you look at, here was the major resistance. We were talking about this, going into in last week's video. We had a multi week consolidation in the transports, and then you can see we just kind of pulled back into support and then broke those highs in and around that area. And if you take a look at this on, for example, looking at it from a different perspective on the Darvis squeeze, which is something that that I look at, we have a long signal on the weekly chart, and you can see better. These are weekly bars. You can see this Darvis box, which denotes here are the highs for the range, and here are the lows for the range. And you can see we broke through the highs here. This is just another perspective of the same chart on a weekly basis. On a weekly chart, we broke through the top of this Darvis box resistance. We pulled back, and look at us go now. And we have potential targets, upwards of, 5,800 in this index. So that would coincide with a retest. Well, we've got a lot of resistance in the backdrop here. If you look at these highs going back, into July of, what year is that? July of 2011, I guess that would be. Yeah, July of 2011, you've got these highs in play here, and that is definitely a resistance area right in around there. So let's just mark that red, and we'll have that reference on our charts going into next week's video. So that's really interesting to note. Transports are right at resistance from 2011 on the weekly chart. That's fairly significant. Will that cap our upside? I don't know, but it's another piece of evidence in the puzzle, another clue in the in the detective's kind of toolbox that we are at multi-week resistance going back in the transports from 2011. So that being said, let's take a look at some of the other markets and get an idea of what's going on here. Let me switch these charts over to, here we go. So let's take a look at, for example, the key currencies, and then maybe I'll flip through a couple of other charts. Let's look at the dollar index. Oh wow, okay. So the dollar index, in last week's video we were talking about, it was a little bit strange that the dollar index was moving higher, and so were the stock index futures. So you can see now we broke out of that wedge, and then we fell right back into the range. So what we wanted to see as a bullish indication for the dollar index was to hold the top of this trend line and then start pushing off. That didn't happen. What we ended up actually getting was a significant pullback on Thursday back into this range of 79 to 80 in the dollar index. So this is really just the range that's been established for a long period of time. 79 is the major support. We need to hold 79 in order to stay, in order to hang on, by a fingernail here to the dollar index. So you can see here the stochastic is buried, fast stochastic is buried to the downside. I would expect at least a little bit of a bounce off of the this. So we'll see if this support holds. Again, this is a multi-year support level. So let's take a look at the euro and see if that's giving us any other indications on what's going on here. I would expect the euro to be bullish, and it is. So, in last week's video, if memory serves me, we were talking about, we need to hold on to this $1.30 level, on the long side for the euro. And you can see here we pulled right back down into this $1.30, and we almost held it to the tick. So that's really interesting. We held this $1.30 level, to the tick, and now we're pushing off above these highs. So the euro to me here looks it looks constructive, and it actually looks bullish. It looks more bullish than bearish. That being said, breaking above this intermediate resistance of these highs and set to put in a new swing point high, you've got your fast stochastic really buried to the high side here. So are we going to get a lot of upside in the euro from here? Well, we might get another push and then potentially a pullback. That's kind of what I'm looking at based on this pattern here, because you see when the stochastics are buried to the upside here, usually you get a move to the upside and then a pullback. You can see it here. You get a move to the upside and then a pullback. Here, you've got quite a bit move higher and then you got a pullback. Okay, so I don't know if we've hit the high here or if we're going to have another push higher and then a pullback. But from a stochastic point of view, your upside is relatively limited. That's not to say we couldn't push up into some of these higher levels. But the euro essentially looks more bullish than bearish, and I'm not really sure where the next resistance level is. So let's take a look and zoom out on the daily chart and see if we can find some resistance points in the background. You've got some of these highs in play here. This was the major resistance. I would probably, mark that level there. There was the, the major resistance it broke through. And then above that, you've got, some of these swing point highs. Going back, you can see that was support. This area was support. It broke through and then it held support. So I think the next major resistance in the euro is going to be a zone between $1.34, $1.34.20 to $1.35.30. So I'm going to pick the lower end of that. I think that $1.34, 20ish is probably going to be the next major resistance level, the next challenge point for the euro. So that's all I really have in the markets this week. Taking a look at the stock index futures, just to recap, stock index futures look bullish. Euro looks bullish, but the potential upside seems a little bit limited. So from a risk reward standpoint here, I'm looking for a move into some of those highs, maybe a little bit of a push higher, but then I'm looking at some major, I believe some major resistance levels overhead, and we'll really need to see what happens there. Dollar index looks, it's back in the range, and it's back down close to the 79 support level. So, just holding on to support. And, in terms of some of the other markets, we could take a quick look at, let's take a quick look at crude oil. Okay, so crude oil is right at the top of this wedge pattern, this wedge resistance, this downtrend line. So it'll be interesting to see what crude oil is going to do. Although one interesting thing here is that, the MACD has crossed the zero line. Stochastics are buried to the high side, at least the slow stochastic. And if you look at my trending indicator, it looks like it wants to cross over into positive territory here. You can see, just a hint of blue here. We've been red for a long time. Could this cycle, to the high side? Possibly. So I'll be taking a look at crude oil here to see if maybe we're going to, break out of this pattern and establish, some bullish action. If we take a look at where it might go from a fib perspective, you've got the 50% retracement right about 96.88, which is a prior, a pretty key level. You can see it lines up with this swing point support here. I'm going to draw a line there. Oops. Okay, so you've got there that, you've got some confluence there between, prior support and that 50% retracement. And then you've got, $100 a barrel, which is, the previous major resistance level back in here around that 618. So if we break this downtrend line in this wedge pattern, this triangle pattern, then, I'd be looking for targets somewhere in and around those areas. Personally, that's what I'd be looking at. And then let's take a quick look at, I know this video is getting a little bit long, but let's take a quick look at gold. The gold futures, let me just see here. Yeah, it's just really fighting with this downtrend line resistance. I don't really have anything here. If we break above this downtrend resistance, then I'd be looking for targets, up in this area. So here's the major resistance here. We look like we have an area of accumulation here. We really need to hold this support around 1640, and if we can get above, 16, Let's see, 1640 is the major support. If we can get above 1675, then maybe we could get something going to, open up the door to test, 1720. And then if we take a look at silver, silver's kind of in the same, the same scenario there, and I can see a downtrend line, coming in somewhere around there. There's the immediate, trend line resistance. We seem to be building a bit of a base pattern. This looks like an area of accumulation to me, where we came off of these lows, kind of spiked out anyone who was trying to get on the long side, in this this kind of complex bottoming pattern. We tested the 21 exponential moving average, which is downtrending, dynamic resistance. So the immediate resistance really is at around 31, 31.25, and then you've got a 50% retracement from this high. Let me just redraw this. From this high to this low, coming in around 31.92. So not much really going on. It really looks more like a basing pattern in silver and a basing pattern in gold. It looks like it's building up energy to make some kind of a move. So we'll keep an eye on that and keep you posted in upcoming videos. My opinion on what I see there. So that's all I have for this week. I hope it helps, and have a great rest of the weekend. Good trading.